My daughter stood in the middle of my attic, wrinkled her nose like the air itself offended her, and said, "Mum, look at all this junk. It's honestly embarrassing. We need to just get a dumpster and clear the whole thing out before we sell the house." Junk. She was standing in the middle of 50 years of her father's life. Every box, every crate, every carefully wrapped bundle up there had passed through Clarence's hands. And my daughter looked at all of it, looked at him, and called it junk. I didn't argue. I just looked at her, and I smiled, the way women my age learn to smile, the one that gives nothing away. Because there was one box up in that attic, a plain grey fireproof box with Clarence's initials scratched into the lid, that I had told Crystal her whole life never to touch. And what she didn't know what she was about to learn in front of everyone was that the junk she wanted to throw in a dumpster was worth more than the house, the cars, and everything she'd ever schemed to take, and that her father had left it up there on purpose, for me to find, for her to answer for. If you've ever had someone treat your whole life like it was worthless, stay with me. Because what was inside that box changed everything. Let me start at the beginning. I married Clarence Freeman when I was 23, and we bought this narrow house in Street Louis the year after. Clarence worked the railroad 41 years long hauls, cold mornings, a lunch pail I packed before the sun came up. He was the quietest man you ever met. He didn't drink, didn't gamble, didn't chase anything, but the one thing that lit him up, coins. It started small. A silver dollar a coworker gave him. Then he was reading books from the library, going to little shows on his days off, coming home with paper rolls of pennies he'd sought at the kitchen table under a magnifying glass until midnight. To me, it looked like a hobby. I teased him about it. "Clarence, you and your bottle caps." He'd just smile and say, "You'll see one day, Retta. A man leaves his family more than one kind of inheritance." He carried one coin in his pocket every single day for 40 years, a worn Morgan silver dollar, rubbed smooth as riverstone from his thumb. His lucky piece. He'd take it out at the supper table and turn it over and over while he listened to you talk. I can still hear the sound of it. We had one daughter, Crystal. And I need you to know she wasn't always like she is now, because it matters at the end. As a girl, she'd sit up in that attic with her daddy for hours while he showed her the coins, told her the story of each one, this president, that war, this mint that burned down. She loved it. She loved him. The hardness came later. It came with a husband named Derek who measured a person by their address, and a life that never felt like enough, and a slow forgetting of the little girl in the attic. It came so gradually, I kept explaining it away. A mother is the last one to admit what she's looking at. Clarence saw it, though. About a year before the cancer took him, he sat me down at the kitchen table, took that silver dollar out of his pocket, and set it in my hand. "Retta, when I'm gone, I need you to promise me 2 things. Keep everything in the attic exactly where it is. And whatever you do, don't let anybody, not even Crystal, open the grey box until you've talked to Estelle." I asked him what on earth was in that box. He just closed my fingers around the silver dollar and said, "Everything you'll need. You call Estelle when the time comes. She'll know." 7 months later, he was gone, and I learned what it means to be an old woman alone in a house full of what everyone else calls junk. The calls from Crystal thinned out, then only came when she needed something. Derek stopped looking me in the eye. And when they visited, Derek had a new habit. He'd wander off to use the bathroom, and I'd hear his footsteps up in the attic, slow, careful, the sound of a man looking at things he was pricing. I told myself he was just curious. I'm good at telling myself things. What kept me steady in those lonely years were 2 people who had no reason to be kind to me, and were anyway. The first was my grandson, Isaiah. He's 15, and he has his grandfather's quiet in him. He'd come on Saturdays and climb straight up to that attic, and we'd sit among Clarence's boxes, and he'd ask me to tell him the stories this coin, that wore the same stories his mother used to love before she decided they were junk. Grandma. He told me once, holding that worn silver dollar up to the light, "This isn't junk. This is Grandpa's whole life. How could Mum not see that?" I had to look away so he wouldn't see my face. The second was a young man named Eli Booker. Eli ran a little coin and collectibles shop over on Gravois, inherited it from his own grandfather. Clarence used to spend hours in that shop, and after Clarence passed, Eli just kept treating me like family. When my furnace broke, he happened by with a space heater. When I brought in a few coins to sell for the property taxes, he looked them over, slid them back across the counter, and said, "Miss Loretta, you don't want to sell these. And even if you did, I wouldn't be the one to let you do it cheap. Your husband trusted me." That means something. He never once tried to take advantage of me, an old widow who by all appearances didn't know what she had. Do you understand how rare that is? Everyone who came near Clarence's attic eventually got a hungry look. Eli never did. Hold on to that for later. It was Isaiah who let the first crack show. He came down from the attic one Saturday looking troubled, and finally he said, "Grandma, don't be mad, but Mum and Dad were here Tuesday when you were at your doctor's." "I know, 'cause I left my jacket and came back for it," he swallowed. "They were up in the attic. And Dad was on the phone. And he said, tell your guy the collection's the real deal, but the old lady has no idea. We clear it out during the estate clean-out. It's easy money." And Mum said, "Just make sure she signs the house papers before she figures out those coins are worth anything." The attic light seemed to flicker. The old lady has no idea. Before she figures out those coins are worth anything. I told Isaiah he was a good boy and not to worry about grown folks' talk, and I sent him home with cookies. Then I climbed up to that attic alone, and I went to the grey fireproof box with Clarence's initials scratched in the lid, and for the first time in 7 years, I lifted it down. "But I didn't open it," Clarence said. "Talk to Estelle first." So I sat there in the dark with it in my lap, and then I went downstairs and made a phone call. "I'm trying to reach Estelle Monroe," I said. "This is Loretta Freeman. Clarence's Loretta." A pause, then a woman's voice, warm and dry and older than I remembered. "Loretta. Lord, I've been waiting 7 years for this call. Clarence told me you'd come when it was time." A soft laugh. "What's that son-in-law of yours gone and done? If you've ever stood in your own home and realized the people you raised have started measuring your life for a dumpster, if that cold feeling is sitting in your chest right now, do something for me before we go on. Tap like and subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I read every single one. Now let me tell you what Estelle Monroe told me and what was in that box. Estelle's office smelled like old paper and strong coffee, and on her wall hung a photograph of her and Clarence and a third man, all young, laughing outside a coin show 40 years gone. She was past 75 now, slow on her feet but bright behind the eyes. "Bring the box?" she asked. I set it on her desk. She smiled at those scratched initials like she was greeting an old friend. "All right, Loretta. Let me tell you what your husband did. It's going to make you cry, and I expect you've earned it." She opened the lid. Inside, on top, was a letter in Clarence's careful hand. Under it, a leather-bound ledger. Under that, folded flat, the deed to the house, and a thick envelope of savings bonds. And beneath all of it, wrapped in soft cloth in fitted trays, the coins, the ones he'd never shown, even me, gold pieces and silver, old and gleaming, each one nested in its own little bed. "Your husband," Estelle said quietly, "was not a man playing with bottle caps. Clarence spent 50 years assembling one of the finest privately held coin collections in this state. He knew exactly what he had. 8 years ago he had the whole thing professionally catalogued, appraised, and insured every piece photographed and documented in that ledger. And he put it, along with this house, in your name. Yours alone. I picked up the letter with shaking hands. It said, Retta, if Estelle's reading this with you, then somebody's decided my life was junk. I always knew it might be Crystal, and it broke my heart to know it, so I got everything ready for you. The collection is real, and it's worth more than you can imagine, and it's all yours. Don't let anybody rush you or shame you or tell you you're confused. You were never confused a day in your life. Use your own judgment about what's right, and keep my silver dollar in your pocket, so I'm with you. All my love, C. How much, Estelle? I whispered. She told me. I won't pretend it went in cleanly. $1.8 million, the coins alone. And here, I'd been selling nothing and clipping coupons and living like a church mouse in a house full of what my own daughter wanted to throw away. And I'll tell you what that number felt like. Not riches. It felt like every year I'd believed I was a small woman with a small life and a hobby-happy husband. All those nights I'd teased Clarence about his bottle caps, and the whole time he'd been quietly building me a fortune and a fortress, and he died before he could show me the treasure with his own hands. Why didn't he just tell me plainly? I asked. He did, Loretta. He told you to keep the attic as it was and call me. He trusted you to find your backbone when the time came. Estelle folded her hands. The question is, are you ready to use it? Because I'd bet my license Derek already has a buyer circling. And a buyer who knows the value, working with a family that thinks you don't, is the most dangerous kind. I thought about Isaiah on the stairs. The old lady has no idea. I thought about Crystal in the attic. Junk. I want to understand everything I can do, I said, and then I'll decide what's fair, not what's angry. I looked at the photograph of Clarence, young and grinning outside that coin show. What's fair? Estelle smiled like she'd waited 7 years to hear it. That's exactly what Clarence said you'd say. I went home and told no one. And a few days later, Crystal came by, and I learned how far she was willing to go. She brought Derek, which meant it was serious, and a folder, which meant it was business, and that bright, managing voice she used on me now, the one you'd use on a child. Mum, we've been talking, and we really think it's time, she said, settling at my table without being asked. This house is too much for you, and honestly, all that clutter upstairs isn't safe. You could fall. There could be a fire. Derek knows a lovely senior community. And we found a company that'll clear the whole attic out for us. No charge, they just haul it away. She slid a paper toward me and set a pen on top. Just sign here so we can get the house listed. You don't need to read all the fine print. I know it gives you a headache these days. You don't need to read the fine print. I looked at the pen. I looked at my daughter. Crystal, I said, did you go up in my attic when I was at the doctor? The bright smile flickered. Derek's eyes came up sharp. Mum, don't be paranoid. Why would we? Did you open the grey box? The one your father told you your whole life never to touch? A long silence. Then Crystal's chin lifted, defiant. Mum, it's a box of old coins. It's junk. Like everything else up there. You have got to stop living in the past. Daddy's gone. Hoarding his bottle caps isn't bringing him back. It's just proof you can't manage on your own anymore. We're trying to protect you. Protect. The word every family reaches for right before they take something. And Derek, who'd been quiet, leaned in with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Loretta. He said, not Mom, not Miss Loretta, just Loretta, cool as you please. Let's be adults about this. That old stuff needs to go. The house needs to sell. And frankly, you need more care than you'll admit. Let us handle it. There it was, the first name, dropped like a coin on a counter. In one word, my son-in-law told me I'd stopped being family and started being an obstacle. Leave the papers, I said. Clarence always taught me to read a thing twice before I signed it. Relief crossed Crystal's face. She thought the hard part was just getting it on the table. At the door, she turned and delivered the cruelest thing of all, light as anything. And Mum, don't get sentimental about the attic. It's just old junk. The memories come with you wherever you go. Just old junk, standing 10 feet from where her father had taught her to love every piece of it. After they left, I called Estelle. They came. They want the attic cleared, the house sold, and me in a home. And Crystal admitted she opened the grey box. Estelle was quiet a moment. Loretta, when they cleared out, did they take anything? Think carefully. I climbed the stairs, opened the grey box, and checked it against Clarence's ledger, coin by coin, the way he'd taught me. And there it was, one tray, one empty slot. A gold piece, Clarence's photograph of it right there in the ledger gone. One's missing, I said, and my voice didn't shake, which surprised me. A gold coin. Crystal took it. A long breath on the line. Then Estelle, hard and careful. Then it's not just greed anymore, honey. That's theft from an estate she has no claim to. And it tells us exactly what they're planning. In plain words, Loretta, they've stopped waiting for your signature. They've started helping themselves. And a family that'll pocket one coin is a family that means to take all of them. I looked down at Clarence's worn silver dollar in my palm. Steady, the same hands that packed his lunch pail for 41 years. They think I don't know what I have, I said. They think I'm too far gone to count. Then let's count, Estelle said. Every last piece. We did it quietly, the way Clarence would have. Estelle brought in a certified appraiser, and over 2 evenings at my kitchen table, under the same lamp where Clarence sorted his pennies, we documented every coin against his ledger. The collection was insured, photographed, ironclad. The missing gold piece we noted, dated, and set aside for the right moment. But there was one afternoon that turned my cold clarity into something with a pulse. I stopped by Eli's shop, and the boy looked troubled the second he saw me. Miss Loretta, he said quietly. I need to tell you something, and I hope it's not out of turn. A man came in last week. Said he was buying an estate collection off a family in your neighborhood. Wanted to know what I'd pay for gold pieces, no questions asked. Eli's jaw tightened. He showed me a photo of a coin to price it. Miss Loretta, it was one of Clarence's. I'd know that collection anywhere. Your husband showed me every piece. He looked me in the eye. Somebody's fixing to sell your husband's life's work out from under you, for pennies on the dollar, and they're using a buyer who knows better and doesn't care. That was the moment I stopped grieving and started deciding. They hadn't just called my life junk, they'd reached into my husband's 50 years and started selling it off in the dark. The grief I'd carried for 7 years turned into something with a spine. I don't want to put my daughter in a cage, Eli, I said, but I am done letting her call her father's life junk while she robs it. Will you help me? Miss Loretta, Eli said, your husband trusted me. It'd be my honor. With Estelle, I put it all in order. The will I rewrote at my own kitchen table, by Clarence's lamp, with his silver dollar in my pocket. The collection, after my lifetime, I directed into a fund in Clarence's name, half to endow a hands-on program at the City Museum, so his coins and his story would be seen by children instead of buried in a dumpster, and half to teach young people the quiet things Clarence knew, how to save, how to look close, how to value what others throw away. I set aside a large protected share for Isaiah, held until he was grown, that no one could ever pressure him to give up, and Clarence's worn silver dollar, I left to him by name. I left an honest gift to Eli with a note. For seeing what my own family couldn't, and for Crystal, I did the thing I believe Clarence would have understood. I did not erase her. I left her a letter and a small fixed gift conditioned on honest living, but not one coin of the collection she'd called junk and helped herself to. Then I made one phone call. I told Crystal she was right, that it was time to settle the house and clear the attic properly, and I asked her to bring everyone that Saturday, Derek, and the buyer too, so it could all be done at once, with no questions later. And I asked if I might have my own people there. Of course, Mum, she said, certain she'd won. Whatever makes it easier. I just don't want any confusion, I said softly. There won't be, she said. It'll be perfect. I hung up, and up in the attic, Clarence's boxes waited in the dark, and I thought, yes, it will be. They came that Saturday with a dumpster already backed into my driveway, Crystal in designer sunglasses, Derek, brisk and pleased, and a stranger, a smooth man Derek introduced as an appraiser friend, here to take some of the old junk off your hands, who I recognized instantly from Eli's description, the buyer. Come to haul my husband's fortune away for pennies. They didn't know I'd asked Eli to drive me. At the door, he squeezed my hand and said, "You've got that look, Miss Loretta. Clarence's look. The one that says somebody's about to learn something." Then he stepped inside beside me, and behind him came Estelle Monroe in her grey suit, with the ledger and the will under her arm, and a certified appraiser I'd hired, with his credentials in his hand. Derek's smile curdled the moment he saw them. "Before anybody hauls anything anywhere," Estelle said pleasantly, setting Clarence's ledger on the kitchen table, "there are some facts about this junk that need to be said out loud. So there's never any confusion later." She looked at the buyer. "You especially will want to hear this, sir." Crystal's sunglasses came off. "Mom, who are these people?" "My name is Estelle Monroe. I was your father's attorney for 40 years and his friend longer than that." She opened the ledger. "And this is the complete, certified, insured catalogue of the collection your father spent 50 years building, the collection you've been calling junk." She nodded to the appraiser, who stepped forward and, in a clear, steady voice, read the certified valuation aloud, piece by piece, and then the total. $1.8 million. The kitchen went dead silent. I watched it land across their faces, the slow, sick understanding. The buyer's smooth smile vanished. Crystal's mouth opened and closed. Derek went grey. "Furthermore," Estelle went on, "every coin in that attic, this house, and everything in it is held in one name alone, Loretta Freeman's, not Crystal's, not Derek's. Clarence saw to that 8 years ago." She turned to the buyer. "So, whatever this gentleman told you he was authorized to sell, he wasn't. You've been brought here to lowball a known fortune off a family that does not own it. I'd think very hard about that, sir, before you say another word." The buyer set down his briefcase, said, "Well," to no one at all, and walked straight out my front door. I never saw him again. "And one last thing." Estelle drew out a single photograph, Clarence's picture of the missing gold piece, and laid it on the table beside the empty slot in the open ledger. "A coin is missing from this documented, insured collection, taken during an unauthorized visit to this attic 3 weeks ago. I'll only say that theft from an estate is a serious matter, and that Mrs. Freeman would very much prefer to keep this in the family if the family gives her a reason to." Crystal's hand went to her purse, just a flinch, but everyone saw it. She turned to me, her voice cracking. "Mom, you knew? This whole time?" I looked at my daughter, and I felt no triumph. I want to be honest about that, because the honesty matters more. People think a moment like this feels like winning. It doesn't. It feels like watching something be buried. 3 weeks ago," I said quietly, "you stood in your father's attic and called his whole life junk. Then you opened the one box he told you never to touch, and you took a piece of him out of it in your pocket." I reached into my own pocket and set Clarence's worn silver dollar on the kitchen table between us, where the light caught it. "I told you never to open that box, Crystal, not to keep a secret from you. To give you the chance to prove you weren't the person your father was afraid you'd become." I closed my hand over the silver dollar. "You opened it anyway. And what was inside told me everything I needed to know." From the doorway, Isaiah, who'd come with me, who I'd asked to stay close, was crying, but he crossed the room and stood beside me and took my hand. And that was the truest thing that happened in that house all day. The collapse came fast. The missing coin quietly returned to Estelle within the week, said everything about how frightened they were. The buyer, it turned out, had lowballed the wrong family in this city before, and word got around. Derek, who'd married a woman he believed was about to inherit a fortune, learned instead that he'd shown his whole hand for nothing, and Crystal, who'd learned too late what her father's bottle caps were worth, couldn't forgive him for the buyer, and he couldn't forgive her for the coin she'd been fool enough to pocket. They separated within the year. I won't pretend it didn't grieve me. A mother grieves her child's ruin, even when her child dug the hole. I did not gloat. I'd done none of it for revenge, only to keep my husband's life from being sold for scrap, and to send it, one day, toward people who'd honor it. What I felt, mostly, was grief, not for the money, but for the little girl who used to sit in that attic and love every story her daddy told, and who somewhere along the way decided her own father's life was junk. Eli came by that evening with Isaiah, and the three of us sat up in the attic among Clarence's boxes while the light went gold through the little window. Eli didn't say he was proud of me. He just picked up the silver dollar, turned it over the way Clarence used to, and said, "He'd be glad it was you holding the line, Miss Loretta." And we sat there not talking, which is the best kind of company there is. A year passed, and my life got fuller instead of smaller. The Clarence Freeman collection opened at the City Museum that spring a whole bright room of it, with his photograph on the wall and the story of a railroad man who spent 50 years seeing value where everyone else saw junk. School children file through it now. Eli helped me set up the fund beside it, teaching young people the quiet things Clarence knew, and he runs the workshops himself on Saturdays. We put Clarence's own words on the wall from that last letter. A man leaves his family more than one kind of inheritance. Isaiah comes every Saturday still. We sit in the attic, which I never did clear out, and he knows every coin's story now, and he started a little collection of his own, one silver dollar at a time. He wants to study history. He says somebody's got to remember the things other people throw away. He says he got the idea from his grandmother. I tell him he got it from his grandfather, and that I only kept the boxes where they were. He says that's the same thing. Maybe it is. And Crystal. About 10 months after that Saturday, a letter came in her handwriting. "Mum, Estelle gave me the letter you left me. You wrote that you forgave me before you ever picked up the pen, and that the door back was always open the day I stopped seeing Daddy's life and yours as something to cash in. I've read it more times than I can count. I'm not asking for anything. I keep thinking about being little in that attic while he told me about the coins, and I don't know when I stopped listening. I'm so sorry I called it junk. It was never junk. Crystal." I read it up in the attic, under Clarence's window, and I cried. Not the quiet, careful tears I'd learned over 7 lonely years, but the other kind. The kind that comes when something you'd buried turns out to still be alive. I haven't given her the collection. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing, and I made my peace with that long ago. But I called her. We talk on Sundays. Last month she asked if she could come up to the attic with Isaiah and me just to hear the stories again. I said yes. It's a beginning. I've learned not to ask any beginning to be more than that. Sometimes in the evening I sit up in that attic and take out Clarence's worn silver dollar and turn it over the way he used to, listening to the little sound of it. And I think about all the years I called his life a hobby, and he just smiled and said, "You'll see." He saw further down the road than any of us. He knew which box mattered. He just trusted me to guard it until the day the wolves came to the door. Here's what I know now, at 75, that I wish I'd known at 68. Nobody gets to decide your life is junk. Not your children, not the years, not the people holding a dumpster in your driveway. They'll tell you it's clutter, that you're living in the past, that you can't manage, that they're only trying to protect you, and those words are not love. They are a hand reaching for something that isn't theirs. You do not have to hand it over. Being agreeable to keep the peace is not the same as being at peace. For 7 years I made myself small so no one would have to make room for me. That isn't humility. It's disappearing. And the people who truly love you will never need you to vanish, to feel comfortable. And kindness, the kind that shows up and asks for nothing, that slides the coins back across the counter and says, "These are worth more than you know," is rarer and worth more than any inheritance. When you find it, in a grandchild, or an honest young man, or an old friend in a grey suit, hold on. That's the family you get to choose. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just waits, quiet as a coin in a box, for the people who called your whole life junk to finally lift the lid and find that everything they threw away was the treasure all along. If this story reached something in you, I'd be grateful to hear it. Have you ever had someone dismiss the things that mattered most to you? Did you find your voice after years of being talked over? Tell me in the comments. Your story might help someone else find their spine tonight. And if these stories mean something to you, please like, subscribe, and share. No matter how invisible you've felt, no matter who called your life junk, remember this: your worth was never theirs to measure, and it is never, ever too late to lift the lid on what you always knew was gold.